We are Christy and Noah Harris, and we lead the South Carolina Supergroup. So welcome. If you want to put in the chat box where you're from.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple minutes. Tell us where you're from. If you're, as long as you're not driving or something and listening in. Where you're from, what you're excited about learning tonight. So we were thinking, hey, like, what can we do that's different? And, build momentum from one webinar to another webinar. And we're like, hey, look, so we just closed on a flip this week on Tuesday. And we're like, hey, what if we just kind of shared what's going on in that throughout the course of the next 3 months or so, which is probably about the time that it's going to take to flip the house. So we're going to share some insight on a flip that we're doing. We're going to renovate it. We'll give you a little bit of the background, how we found it.
We want to talk about just the process because we get this a lot, and I get this a lot, coaching of how to work with contractors. I hear every day, like I literally this morning, first thing I jumped on a Facebook group, it was someone local talking about how a contractor had done a bad job on her kitchen. And it was really bad. If I could share the picture, I would. And she paid them like $4,000 just for the kitchen, plus an additional 4,000. Anyway, I read the whole feed and I'm thinking like, how in the world did this happen? And I'm like, did you have a scope of work? Did you have this? And guess what? She didn't.
Yeah.
So these are like really important things that we would love to walk you through our process to know, like, one, we're on like day 2 of this, and the entire deck is almost down on the back, which is awesome. They're rebuilding that. And then the entire kitchen is out like in that fast of a time period. And the beauty of this is we haven't even been at the property. I'm just getting picture updates from my guys, which I love. So it allows us to be hands off, but still have a great deal and make some money. And this cool property is, one that we could really rehab and sell, or we could keep as a buy and hold. We're still contemplating kind of what to do. So we're going through the process. And what's cool about this one is it's not like a full gut. So a lot of times when we think of like rehabbing, we think we have to buy a house that needs 60 grand worth of work to make money. And that's not the case in this. This is actually a really nice house. So,
yeah, lots of options. Which is super cool. You can keep it for the cash flow, but, still renovate it. Do the BRRRR method, wholesale. So first thing I'd recommend is going back to maybe a month or 2 ago when Christy and I did like the marketing webinar. So so the first thing we'll talk about is just real quick, Christy, how did we find this house?
So this was a really interesting thing. So pre-pandemic, so this was 2020, and literally it was January 2020. We have a short-term rental. And I was leaving our short-term rental and I was driving up the hill, and we target this area that we call Arsenal Hill. We're in Columbia, South Carolina. And I was driving up the hill. So I'm always farming like that neighborhood and streets. And I've always noticed this house looked, like it needed a little love, but, hadn't really paid attention to it, right? Because it had like a smaller driveway, not everything about it like I really love from the outside. So I was like, I don't know, would that be something I pick up? Well, lo and behold, I was driving up the hill and I'm like, oh my God, there's a for sale by owner sign. So I like immediately take a picture of the sign, pull over, call the sign, and I get a gentleman, super nice guy. And he's like, listen, my husband and I bought this house as our forever home. Okay. We didn't even know the pandemic was coming. This was just like, I see this lead, a call. He's like, my husband and I bought this house. This is our forever home. But time and circumstance have changed. I was like, okay, well, what's really cool is we flipped a house on the next block. We have an Airbnb. We're very familiar with this area. Like, I'm really interested. I'm sure everybody's telling you that, but I really am. So we went and looked at this house, and this house needed a lot of work. Like, it was a lot of work. So they were willing to owner finance it. The numbers actually made sense. But what ended up happening is during the process of us negotiating, the pandemic hit. And when that hit, I automatically saw what was happening with permitting downtown. And I thought, I don't know if I really want to get into this, because we thought about it like as buying it to hold. But then we thought about flipping it. And I was like, this is going to take a lot longer than I'm comfortable with. So I told the guys, I was like, it's great meeting you. You're wonderful. I know someone's going to buy this house. I know someone's going to make it work for you, but I just don't think it works for us. So we built this really good relationship with them. Well, fast forward, I mean, you guys know this, the pandemic hits, and for like 2 years, all of a sudden 2 years just went by in like the blink of an eye. So ironically, literally 2 years later, almost 2 years later, I'm driving downtown, like in November, going to our short-term rental, by the house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'd seen them progressively working on it. And I was like, oh, it looks like it's done. I wonder if they're going to list it. Like, I knew they had sold it. But I didn't know what happened, or I really didn't know if they sold it. Actually, I didn't know if they owner financed it because I really hadn't talked to them. So I shot an email to one of the guys that, the one that was the louder guy that I kind of connected with. And I was like, I'm just actually checking in on you guys. Like, are you alive? How did you make it through the pandemic? Because they were just such nice guys. And he's like, oh my gosh, it's so great to hear from you. Like, how are you and your boys? Right. Because they met our boys, and we have a 5 and 7-year-old. And I was like, well, it's been crazy. We virtual schooled kindergarten. We're back in school, went through everything. And he's like, my daughter from up north moved down into our house that we were living in. We ended up selling that house to someone out of Charleston. They bought it and they're using it as a secondary home. They finish it off. And we talked a little more, and he's like, yeah. And by the way, we bought our forever home during that process, and my daughter's in our other home now, and we're thinking about selling it. I don't know, would you guys be interested? So this was like a totally organic, random, like when we talk about following up, this was literally like, I didn't know he had a deal. I was just calling to see if he was still alive and how he was doing, because they were great people. And it ended up that it was a deal for us.
Yeah, well, you were following up. You were following up with, like, how did it go with the other people, and how did the house, so it was 2-year follow-up. And then we went and looked at the house. We were kind of back and forth about it. And then we re-followed up, because then we told them, I think we're going to pass. I don't know if the numbers are going to make sense. And
he wasn't in a sense of urgency. His daughter was living there. She was trying to debate if she wanted to move back up north. So he kind of just threw it out. And he's an agent, by the way. He's gotten his license. So he was like, hey, I might list this house on my own. If I do, here's what he told me. He gave me the rundown. And because they thought originally this was their forever home, they did beautiful work in there, like gorgeous work. And he was like, listen, if I'm going to list it, I'm probably going to list it at 120. So I automatically was like, all right, if you list it, it has to pay realtor fees. I deducted everything out. And I was like, yeah, we revisited comps. We were like, I think this is a deal, like for a short-term rental or a flip, this is a good opportunity.
Yeah. And as the market, things continue, to rise, it's good to just stay on your comps, because you're just with the next slide or whatever we do, like when the next phase of running numbers, even just 4 or 5 months later, now the numbers started to make sense where they needed to be. And so we were like, hey, call those people, call them back, see if they're still at that number, because now that number might work for us, which is kind of interesting. So if you have leads from 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago,
which you should, because you should be databasing all of your leads,
and call them and be like, hey, I know we talked last spring and you were looking to sell your house at this price. I think maybe we might be able to make that work now. Rerun some of those numbers and test the temperature of the sellers to see if any of the motivation might have changed too, which was happening on both ends with this deal.
So yeah, for them, it was like, we kind of cut our ties with that. So he was like, well, listen, we have an interested buyer, but we like you guys, because we did form that relationship.
Yeah. And then, obviously Christy, I was going to say, hey, Christy, tell everybody on the camera how you found the deal, or how we found the deal. And she was going to say, we called old leads. We just followed up with people. But she spent 15 minutes talking about the rapport that she had built with that seller, which is a great learning lesson, because when you build all that rapport with people, they remember you, they want to work with you. And when you call them back, they're like, yeah, let's make a deal. I really wanted it to work out the first. So
it was really cool.
Good lesson.
It really is. I mean, we get so inundated now with just our time and thinking that the only way to find leads is to have an auto dialer and not talk to people ever. And I believe that works as well. But I also believe some of your best relationships and deals will come from relationships you built.
Yep. So I'm going to share a screen with you guys.
This is cool. We're going to go through kind of
real quick
everything.
Desktop analysis, just some real easy basic stuff, give you some good tips on managing your projects. So,
and now remember, if we're not going into every detail on the REI USA website, there's plenty of other coaches that coach different elements of breaking down the repairs strategically, all of that. So definitely, check on those as well.
So this is a real good tip, something that we do for everyone, for project manager, for ourselves, for our private money lenders, is we create a Facebook page that is private. Make sure it's private for just you and anyone else that needs to be in there. So in our case, our private money lenders are in this group, so they can see what the progress of the house, and they're not texting us every week.
They live out of state. They're actually in Florida.
Daily, we upload pictures and updates, so they get them on their phone notifications, and it's a great way to communicate. And it's also just a great place to keep all your pictures, any little notes. And Facebook's free, so it's just a good way to do it. So this is how I'm going to show you some pictures, and these pictures are in that private group. Okay, so this is the outside of the house, and then in Christy, their front yard, building rapport with the seller, right? So it's a brick home. I like to just walk the yard when she's talking with the sellers and just kind of get a view of like the feel for the neighborhood. Like, what are the neighbors like? What's someone going to think of when they pull in for the first time? What's the curb appeal like? These are the kind of things that I'll look at when Christy's talking with the seller. It's a nice little house, a little carport. They had it all like Miami South Beach style with like the curtains, which is kind of cool. The seller is an interior designer, so you'll see some of the pictures are like, oh, this is like.
And he had a palm tree out front. It's funny because that wasn't something negotiated before, and they said we'd really love to take this palm tree. And Noah's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, just give them the palm tree. Like, if they want that tree, take it. Like, and that's another piece of like, that's not a make or break, right? So makes everyone happy.
Here's the living room here. So as you can see, it looks like really good.
I'm going to step out for just a second.
Okay. It's bedtime at our house, so that always doesn't go as planned. So as you can see, it looks real nice, right? So you walk in, you're like, oh, dang, like this could be something good. They took great care of it. What's cool about this property, you guys, it's crazy. Like, we're not in right now with like the uncertainty of the availability of materials and supplies. Like, we're very picky with our flips in that we want to find houses that we feel aren't going to take 8, 9, 10 months to renovate. And this is a perfect example of like what we are focusing on right now. Houses that are cosmetic. Bathroom is in great shape. We're going to update some things, probably spray the tile here. And get rid of spray the blue tile. We're not even going to rip any of this out. We'll probably leave the vanities as is. It's got a really cool mirror. We're going to leave all that stuff. Under the house was super clean, plumbing, electrical, upgraded, new hot water heater, air conditioning, less than 5 years old. Had a sub-zero fridge, which was super cool. We're going to leave that. Christy was like, I think we should get rid of it because it makes the kitchen look smaller, but it's actually super thin counter depth. So we're going to be leaving all of that, or leaving the fridge, throwing the stove in a rental property, and selling some of the other stuff to get some cash for the rehab. This is the back deck. We actually took down this deck today. We closed on this property on Tuesday, and we just started renovation, dropped the dumpster Wednesday, took down the deck tonight. As you can see, it's got some cool curb appeal, right? And so as you're walking the house, especially with these brick homes down here in the Southeast US, you're looking for those hairline cracks or anything like that. That might, say something might be wrong with the foundation, but it's just a good looking house. So create a Facebook group, post your pictures here, store your data here. Your private money lenders will absolutely love it. They're going to feel like they're a part of the project too, which is super important. All this got ripped out today, putting a brand new kitchen in. And I'll ask Christy because she handles the budgeting side of the renovation, but this is probably about a $10,000 to $12,000 update that we're going to be doing to this home, right? Just ordered the cabinets today. So it's super cute. You guys get the idea. So, this is pictures of the property, right? But the first thing that we're going to do is run comps, right? We're going to look at comparables when we're on the phone with someone, writing down the address. The very next thing I'm doing, maybe even while I'm on the phone with the seller, is I'm pulling up the property address. And I was pretty familiar with this neighborhood because ironically, our next door neighbor, had 2 houses that they were listing for sale on the street behind this street, ironically. So I'm pretty familiar with it. And I'll show you on realtor.com. And nothing fancy. Like, when I'm ready to pull the trigger on purchasing a house, like everything seems to make sense. That's when I'll call my real estate agent and be like, hey, can you pull some official comps for me within the same neighborhood? or within a mile or within a half-mile radius of the house, just to see what's like right now. Like, it's so important, especially with today's market, to get a feel for what's happening right now with comps, with properties that are pending, selling. Are comps good? Is everything seem to be going good? But then there's one real low one that might screw things up, right? Call it a comp bomb. So we're looking at this. So the house is right here on Parkwood Drive. And these two houses here are friends' houses that they were selling at the time. They just recently sold them. So this is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 914 square feet for 142. Okay. Now our subject property is like 1,200 square feet. So it's a 3-1, 1,200 square feet. So there's an extra 300 square feet, which means, just based off of this comp, you're looking at like 175, maybe 178 or 180 tops.
And it's a better street, honestly, visually, and bigger yard. Yeah,
bigger yard. It's a nicer house. Like, our friends are selling. These are rental properties that our friends had that they just recently sold for 147. So it's like, okay, like this is what's going on. And then I was looking at this before we logged on the webinar. I was like, oh, it's a new one for sale here, but it actually sold. So it was listed at 174 and it recently sold for 180. This is a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, no carport, but it has an extra half bath. So I feel like the 178, 180 price point on this flip is going to be pretty good. And, this is, decent. I'm not sure what's going on the inside on this one, but in my mind, I'm not looking for like exactly what I'm selling it for at this point in time. I'm just asking myself, okay, where were they at? Where do I think I could be? Is it worth our time to go and then look at the property? Right. And if it's like, based on the conversation I had, they were thinking between, 110 and 120 if they listed on the MLS. These houses are selling like 155.
And also knowing the condition of the house is really good. It really, it's livable right now. If we wanted to Airbnb it, I don't, you still have to do the same stuff, but it's a good deal with equity.
So on the phone, like, we had a good rapport with these people, but if you don't have good rapport yet with someone, you're like, hey, what needs to be replaced? If anything, how's the condition? Sometimes people will say, well, everything's fine. And it could be fine. It could be working, but it could also be 20 or 30 years old or 40 years old or really dated, right? So you can ask the questions like, hey, within the last 5 years, what has been updated? Or if you were to update something in the house, where would you start, right? And if they say, well, probably the bathroom or probably the kitchen, right now, okay, it's probably dated, not necessarily like with the times. That might be something we have to do, but this isn't good enough right now to say, hey, let's go look at it.
And I always ask the majors. I think that's the big thing. So the roof, the HVAC, the hot water heater, right? Those things are really expensive. Windows, have they been replaced? And when you go through all of that, it's really good because then you have a general idea of like, okay, well, what are we looking at? So, this one, they're like, oh, the roof is 2 years old. The HVAC is 2 years old. We put in a tankless hot water heater. I'm already like, whoa, okay, that's like 15 grand right there. That's like a plus. We're in the positive. So I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, super cool. So then we're going to go through the walkthrough and real quick, Christy, because this is kind of like your thing. Let's just scroll through the pictures. Like, what are you looking for when you start going through a property like this?
So really simple things, guys, that I look at the lighting, right? So like what's interesting about this home is there is actually nice lighting, but it's lighting that's very particular to them. Like, it's not going to appeal to everyone. So I already know, like, okay, the lighting's probably going to have to be replaced. Like, it's super cool. Like, I could maybe in this market, we could leave it, but I know that's not going to be ideal. Like, if, in honesty, if it's a guy that's probably in his 20s buying the home, he'll be like, he might be able to look past that, but that might not be his favorite. So why not just like go, okay, let's put new fans in. So I'm going to look at fixtures first. I'm going to look at, so big things I didn't say with the big ones are electrical. So anything that usually is built before like 1980 is kind of where I'd look. A lot of times I'm looking at the electrical box to see, does it need to be updated? And that's big because if it hasn't been, I'm probably going to have to update it. And that's a large expense. So what's interesting with this house is they had updated the electrical in the box. What's funny about it is as I looked through the house, I was like, why is this light switch in a weird spot? It's like they updated it, but the electrician, they probably got a deal on the electrical. I'm guessing maybe knew the person. And the guy didn't necessarily move all the stuff in the proper spots, which I know is going to be kind of an issue. So I had my electrician come in. My electrician noticed something I didn't notice in the bathroom, because remember, this was 2 men living here. There was no electrical socket in the bathroom. And I didn't even notice it. And usually I do, because I'm thinking, like, if it's an old house, it's usually on the mirror in the bathroom up top, if it's like old wiring and electrical. And as you can see, they have this tile bathroom. So my electrician's like, you want to plug in the bathroom, right? I'm like, duh, good job, Lucy. Somehow I missed that. So again, that's why you do your estimate and then have your walkthrough. So in here, what's great about this bathroom, and we just refurbished one in our short-term rental, we're having them come in an epoxy and spray the tile on the floor and the walls. And even if, because I hear this all the time, well, if it's cracked, you can't do that. Yes, you can. This whole bathroom we had, and no one could probably pull up a picture at the end of this one, but it was cracked all the way through and through. And our guys came in an epoxy. That's a husband and wife team. The floor, everything white, and it looks beautiful. Yeah. So with this one, we
How
really,
much was that?
that was $1,300 for a bathroom about half the size of this. So I'd say this bathroom will be about $1,800 for the shower, wall, everywhere, the floor. It's not worth it in this price point to go in and rip all of this out. That's just an extra expense for no purpose.
And it takes a couple of days to do it.
So all the fixtures are good, like the shower heads and that, like everything looked great in here. We're obviously going to repaint the house, but major things I'm looking for are cracks in the walls that look like there could be a foundational issue, right? Like, are there stair step cracks in any of the doorways in the house? And there were not. On the exterior, everything looked good. But as we walk through, and this, what's cool is they had already cut out a wall. So I wouldn't necessarily, everyone gets so focused on, I have to have a super open floor plan. I'm going to take everything out. And it's like, why? Like, this is the perception of the open floor plan, but it also leaves a lot of space to make an awesome kitchen. So we had our guy draw out the kitchen, and we're going to do like a U shape in there. They left that nice refrigerator, which is awesome, which was also kind of a headache in a sense, because I'm like, it's so amazing. We have to use it, but now we have to build it in. But my guy's like, oh, that's really easy. I can frame up the wall. We're actually going to shift that refrigerator down to the window opening. And then we're going to run the stove next to that. And then around cabinets, a Lazy Susan's in the back corner. So we'll, of course, show you an after picture. But what's cool is this house had all hardwood flooring, and they whitewashed the flooring. So the flooring was amazing.
Let me picture that.
Yeah, right there. So the hardwoods, they went in the kitchen, they did LVT, which is really pretty. So again, we don't have to replace any of this. Now, the thing I did notice, on the trim, they'd taken the shoe molding up and never put it down when they whitewashed the floor. So I was like, immediately like, we're going to have to do that because it looks unfinished. So I'm just looking for things that look unfinished. Or if I lived in this home, this is how I think about it. If I lived in this home, what would be an issue to me that I would stare at every day that needed to be fixed? So that's all your visual stuff. So the cabinets were bad, new countertops. But outside of that, like the doors, interior wise are very good. The exterior doors are kind of flimsy. So we're going to do those. As you saw, the back deck was like the worst part. They came in and tried to cover up a cement slab, and they covered up the cement steps too. And it's old. So I kind of went back and forth because, as you guys know, the price of lumber's up. I'm like, do we need to build as big a deck? It's not really that big of a house. Can we build the deck lower? So yesterday with my guy, I made an executive decision just to rip the entire deck down. And we're actually going to drop it to like a low lying deck, which I think will be better because it'll make the yard look bigger. And if it's somebody that is older that doesn't want to hike a bunch of steps onto the deck, I think it'll be more appealing to like all ages now.
Cool. All right. So that was the initial walkthrough. We're like, all right, in your mind, I think when I did the walkthrough initially, and I was kind of like running the numbers, I put in a repair budget of almost 8,500.
Okay.
Right. And, give or take a little, that's like I'm thinking 8,500. Where are we at now? Because I think we added some things. Like
So I did. So, and there's something I might end up doing because again, like the comps, I was like, well, Noah, how confident do we feel at like a 180? Because if we think it's going to be a 170, 175 versus a 180, some of these things I might not do because it really doesn't make sense to. So once I ran everything that like we want to do, I think we're going to be right around 11,000 on that. The only thing I'm still like back and forth, and it's not going to matter. It's more of like a personal decision. So in some of these houses, if you guys see this in the South, if you're in the South, the laundry room is in the carport. So you have to go outside to the carport. So for me, I'm like, oh, that's is that going to be a make or break? Well, it's not, because honestly, those houses that sold 2 streets over, it was the same situation and they didn't change it. So I know it's not going to matter in the climate of the market now. However, I'm like, how can we kind of make this a little better? So I thought about taking the side of the carport and not necessarily fully enclosing, but maybe doing some enclosure with wood for the perception of it's kind of closed. My laundry room's out here for that feel. But honestly, I mean, we could probably close in that garage for not that much more. I don't know if it'll get us more money, so it might not be worth it. So that's where you go in like, okay, how much are we going to be on the deck down to the dollar? You know, how much are we going to be on this, and kind of look at that. But
cool. Any questions so far? Like if you have any questions, you can just drop them in the chat box, or do use the chat box if you got any questions. Make sure you hit to everyone so that everyone can see what your question is. So this is a back office system we use, one of them, and just kind of run the numbers. So I just changed the price point to 180 because I think if we put that extra couple grand in doing the things we're doing, I think it'd be a no-brainer for someone. Repair costs 11,000. Now I put the whole time here when I'm running my numbers for 6 months. Even though the rehab's going to take 3 months, and the reason being is this: I have a new private money lender, and the person's lending, 120,000. So they're lending. By the way, we bought it for 112. Okay, so we purchased it for 100.
So we're all in like $113,642 after closing costs.
Yeah, so that leaves, we'll put a little bit of money out of our own pocket for the renovation, but we're borrowing 120. He's like, look, Noah, because I wasn't paying him any points, I was just paying him a flat 10% annualized interest, and he's like, this looks like a pretty quick flip. I'm concerned I'm going to get my money back too soon. Like I want it to be out there working. And I was like, hey, no problem. Since we're not doing any origination fees or points, I'll make sure that you get at least 6 months worth of interest.
My husband's really nice. I would have aimed
she never would have.
I would have aimed for 4.
But, we're friends. And I was like, hey, look, it's your first time with us. Like, we'll take great care of you. What he's doing, he's selling all his old crappy properties in Fort Myers, Florida, that he's just sick of managing. He's got like 100 of he's like, I just want to do this because on some of those properties, I'm not even making 10% rate of return on my rentals.
So we see the longevity of the relationship. So it's completely worth it. And the deal still makes sense. And again, what if we didn't flip this and we just held this as an Airbnb? Like, I don't know if Noah kind of went over those numbers, but I'll tell you based upon this, because we have several short-term rentals in the area, we could probably gross around $3,000 to $3,500 a month, depending on the month of the year. So that it would still be a great solution too. We could refinance it and keep it and have equity.
Yeah, and we might still. But so running the numbers for our flip, we always run the numbers for a flip too, because like if we had to sell this thing for some reason a few months down the road, it makes better for everyone if you're able to have options, right? So we're plugging the numbers in here, the property taxes, and there's no HOA, our holding costs, insurance, and utilities. We know it's going to be about $400 a month, and it shows here I'm borrowing 120. And in this back office system that I use, it's hard to, I wish you could just type in the amount that you're borrowing. It always makes you do a percentage, but that's just about the gist of it. 10% interest. And you can see down here, if, 6% realtor fee, which is probably high. You could probably come down a little bit on that. But it has your total financing costs to get the deal done. And if we put the Christie's 11 grand in it, and we can get my 180, you're looking about a $33,000 profit, which is pretty good for a real modest rehab. Like we've done really big rehabs and
guys, just so you know, I plan on having this done in like a 6-week turnaround.
Yeah.
Like the way we're moving, I'm like, yes, right on track. So the reality is when you look at that, we would sell it faster, but we're still paying him obviously his 6 months, but just know, like, if we hadn't gone that route and used him, we could have made more, right? But we're looking for him to lend on a bunch of our deals. So on to the next.
And then, so now we're like, okay, this looks good. Like preliminary numbers. We got the contract signed, and now it's about, I think I'll show you how I would present this to a private money lender. So again, remember, this is the first time that this person has ever lent money to us. So it's the first time that they're experiencing the new Facebook page and experiencing working with us and what that looks like.
And I recommend too. So like, we use a CRM to manage all this. Find something that works for you. Like, I don't care what it is. Like, you need something that you can run your numbers on, and you need something to save all your property leads. So that's really important. Find out what works for you. You know, this works for us, and it makes it easy.
And it's called Real Flow. If you have any questions, you can let us know about that. So now I'm like, okay, now this is the part I really enjoy. Christy likes the rehab part. I enjoy the raising the money and presenting the deals to the lenders. So this is like a cover page of what I would send someone that's going to be funding a flip for us, right? So it's like just an overview. As you can see on the left-hand side, I'll do like a quick property overview of like why we like the property, where we see value in the property, what makes the deal maybe unique or special. I'll put the ARV, right? And at the time it was 175 when I presented this to the private lender. I think we'll get a little bit more, 175 then. I've always put like my info and then the closing attorney's information on here too. And I do that for two reasons. Number one, if someone needs to get this information, I want them to be able to readily be able to get it. And second, it's for credibility. So at no point in time is anyone ever lending us money to fund the real estate deal. Everything goes through the attorney. So by sharing that information over and over and over again, it makes your lender comfortable. And really the attorney works for the lender because the attorney is going to be the one drawing up the documents and things like that. Now we cover those costs of drawing up the documents. We pay for that as a courtesy.
Now we should say in South Carolina, we close with attorneys, not title companies. So depending on your state, you might close with the title company, but an attorney can draft all of this for you as well.
Yep. And I'll put the wire information down here and always remind them to call to verify. And then I'll put an analysis of the deal. So even though I've probably talked to the person on the phone already, sent them email, I'll reiterate like the deal analysis. I'll throw in a couple, as you can see, comps down there, halfway down the page. And I'll say like what date they closed, similar properties, things like that. And then I'll put the loan offer on here, just outlining some of our terms, 10% interest, 12-month term. So we set all of our loans up on 12-month balloon schedules. Even if they take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, that's just what we do. Closing date was February 20th. We closed a week early. And I let them know if they're getting a first position lien, I let them know that because that's good. They have control.
That makes people feel good. They're in first place. They're not behind someone else, and not that they can't be a second position lender, but behind a hard money lender, but this makes them feel good.
Yep. And then the bottom part makes them feel good too. Cause it's, hey, look, Mr. and Mrs. Lender, like, our company focuses on buying houses at a discount. This gives, you confidence that your loan is secured by an asset that's worth way more. And here's the 3 critical things that we use to help make sure that you get your money is safe and secure. We give them a promissory note, a mortgage, and we list them on the insurance as a lost payee. And we talk about the attorneys and think people that we work with. So this is the cover page that we got over. And then I'll include a couple photos. Before I invite them to the Facebook group, I'll share some photos like this. These are the same ones you saw so that they can see. And I'll say, hey, repair estimate is attached. And then I outlined the deal here as well. So this is similar to what we were just going over. And, some people I've had say like, are you comfortable with them knowing how much money you make or things like that? Absolutely. Right, Christy? It's like
they're making great money. Usually their money's sitting somewhere that's making nothing. And like, I've never had someone say, I can't believe you're making all this profit.
Yeah. And
because they're not doing any work.
The more profit we make, the safer it is, right? For the lender, where they have stronger collateral.
And listen, the reality is they're happy seeing us make this money because they know we're going to do 2, 3, 4, 5 more deals and put their money to work. So they're like, it's worth your time and it's worth ours. So it's a win-win.
If this number said 3,000, would they feel more comfortable? No. Right. So this is a good thing. And then this was just a quick outline of my walkthrough, my repairs, and my numbers are very general compared to what Christy's would be. And then I'll throw in the comparable sales report. So if you get this from a real estate agent, however you get your data, these are just houses Some of them are the ones I just showed you. And they'll see, okay, yeah. And they can go in, they can, a smart lender is going to say, you know what, I'm going to Google 2638 Harrison Road. I'm going to see if these numbers match up.
And if it's their first time lending, I would recommend tell them to do that, because it just makes people feel good. I've had lenders before that literally are like, oh, we trust you. We know you do real estate. I'm like, no, that's not. I want you to look at all this. I want you to read it and know, that makes me feel really good. But if you ever lend to someone else, don't ever do that. That is the worst idea. It could go really bad. So,
really bad. All right. So now, so we've got the money lined up, green light, let's go. Right. So one of the big things we see people really miss the mark on is, I'm going to stop the share for a minute. I'm going to pull up this PowerPoint slide, is hiring contractors and managing their projects. So now we're in the phase. I need my elbow. Now,
I was pushing his elbow out of the way because I felt like I was on a plane. Like if you've ever sat in his 3-seat and the person in the middle is all up in your space. I was like, move your elbow down.
Where's that?
Well, I think what's really important about contractors is really, because I do a lot of this, just one, I think always honestly go with your gut if you really want to know the truth. I think one of the biggest things that you can do incorrectly is if you ever have a bad feeling about someone and you just are still going they're telling me everything right, but I have this bad feeling, do not go with them. I don't care if it's a deal, a friendship, whatever. There's a reason you're feeling that way. So I believe in go with your gut. But if you have a bad gut and you always go with everyone, because that happens, right? You're very trusting and everyone's super nice. There are some things that are put in place to help prevent you from making a bad mistake. Or if you get in with a contractor that it's not going as you thought it would, and things aren't going well, there's ways to get out of that. And these are some of the documents that we use within this.
All right. So this should be popped up. Can you guys, you guys can see this, right? If you can see it, just say yes. It should say forms and documents. So there's 6 documents and forms that we use. And I'm gonna ask Christy to go through this with you guys. And we call them the critical docs, because every single time you're going to use these, and the moment that you don't use one of these, it comes back to bite you in the butt. So
the scope of work is one. So that the scope of work is the breakdown of what actually needs to be done. And when we talk about we use Real Flow, I think Stacy talks about using Carrot. There's different CRMs that help you kind of design your repair list. And it's really important to know what you need to do, because you can't go to a contractor. And I'm talking very detailed, everyone. You need to know, as much as demo the kitchen. Okay, well, what does demo the kitchen mean? Because there could be tile on the wall that you wanted to keep. There could be a piece of granite you wanted to keep. Maybe you wanted to keep that corner cabinet. But when you tell someone demo, they're thinking we're ripping everything out. And then you get over there and you're like, that's not what I expected. That's I was telling you that message I read on Facebook this morning from this woman. I looked at this kitchen and I'm like, did you draw it out? Well, I told them this. And I'm like, I know, but listen, I remember in the 6th grade, my teacher did an experiment on making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And she gave everyone the same assignment. And we had to write out detailed how to make that sandwich. And it was hilarious because everybody did it different. And she followed the instructions exactly how they were. And it's oh my gosh, this can go really bad 20 ways. That's it. So this is your PB&J gone wrong. Same with contractors. It was a great experiment. It was so good that I remember that from the 6th grade. But it also taught me be super open, say the right things, but it doesn't matter if I'm saying them, write them down, let them have a copy, leave a copy on site of the scope of work. So even if you've given them one, I do expect them to have them with it, but I also know sometimes that doesn't happen, right? I forget things too. So even post it on the job site. So they can reference back to and look at it, or if you had a change order, it's on there. So I think it's really important to go through detail oriented. What exactly do you need removed? What exactly is staying, where it needs to be put, keeping your job site clean at all times, pick up everything when you leave. That's super important. We have a huge rule of if you leave the property and it's under renovation, turn the water off at the water meter, use the water key to turn the water off. We've had several houses flood. That is the truth because of many different situations. So we're just preventing that happening. If there's a water leak and you leave at 8 p.m. and you don't come back till 8 a.m., it can be really bad. So the scope of work, you want to get that down. There's a contractor agreement And this basically states what that contractor has said that they are going to do for the amount of money they said they will do it. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the scope of work, right? So it also says, hey, listen, changes might be made throughout the process. That's okay, but you need to submit a change order form. So it goes through this contractor agreement, basically saying, this is the date you started, right? This is the date you will be finished. If you're not finished at this time, then you are charged $100 per day after that point, or whatever amount you want to do. You can hold them to it. It's a legal binding agreement. I think what's really important, take into account if there are change orders and we were supposed to finish, April 1st, well, guys, let's be realistic. Maybe it's now not going to be done until May 1st. Okay. But we know that. So we need to communicate. Communication's big, like relationships, life, business, especially. I'm going to actually skip down to the payment schedule really fast. This goes hand in hand to me for the contractor agreement. So the payment schedule, you map out, you have a payment schedule week per week. So let's say your contractor says this is an 8-week process. I break it down week by week. So instead of me telling the contractor week 1, get this, and this done, because the reality is, guys, I'm not the one demoing. I'm not the one pulling out. I don't know how long it takes to set cabinets. I do in my mind, but if you're brand new, you don't. So why am I going to set an unrealistic goal that's not going to be met? So I have the contractor go, okay, week 1, what's going to be completed this week? Okay, week 2, right? So when Friday comes and it's time to get paid, if you gave me 10 things that should be done and there were no unknowns that were found that week, we were right on schedule and now you're off schedule, you're not going to get paid that full $2,000. I'm going to say, okay, listen, obviously we're behind schedule now. I'm going to pay you $1,500 for work done till now. Now let's reevaluate this payment schedule for the following week. What's going to be done next week? Need you to be really realistic. Okay. So that helps them go places, basically the blame on them. They can't come in and say, well, Christy, you set this super unrealistic schedule. This is ridiculous. It's absurd. Nobody could have met this. It's all your fault. Because that's what's going to happen. I promise you, when people get behind, it starts to be the blame game. It's never their fault. It's always yours. So having these things in place is huge, because if you come to the end of the schedule, it's like it wasn't done on time. Well, that's not my problem. So I don't have to keep you around. I'm only going to pay you for the amount of work done. That's important too. Don't pay people up front. And I know right now, I totally understand this. You're going to meet a busy GC. They're going to say, listen, in order for me to do your project, I need 10% down right now because I'm going to take other jobs on for somebody that will pay me. I wouldn't do it. I'm just telling you, I know some people do. Maybe you are in a very busy market. You have to do something. If you're going to do that, please just make sure you have all these agreements and papers signed in place and you have massive references, because that can go really bad. I've coached a lot of people.
Yeah, we've only done that one time, and it was in Florida, and because but they came highly recommend, like you said, highly recommended.
His mom was managing one of our rehabs and she personally knew this person.
Yeah.
And had done work with him prior to. So I felt confident and I was like, okay, I told him this better work out.
But all the other stuff is signed.
Right.
So the difference is all these other documents.
So a lot of times people pay people and they have nothing in place. They have nothing signed, which comes down to the next ones. So what's interesting is you'll have a contractor say, hey, listen, I can do this work for $50,000. Oh, great. You're thinking that sounds like a great deal. This guy's been the cheapest more than anyone. And then you go, okay, sign this W-9. And then all of a sudden it's like, wah, wah. What do you mean I have to pay taxes on that money? I'm like, what do you mean you got to pay taxes? I got to pay taxes on my profit I made. You have to pay taxes on the work you've done. So you want someone that's legitimately running a business. I don't care if they're a sole proprietor. That's fine. I don't care if they're a business, but they need to fill out a W-9. Basically what that says is all money they made throughout that year, they are going to pay taxes on. You're not liable. If you don't do these W-9s, at some point the IRS could come back and say, hey, there was $200,000 you paid out. Nobody paid taxes on that. Christy and Noah, Revive Homes, you're about to pay taxes on that. We never want that to happen. So if somebody isn't willing to send that W-9, you're not willing to work with them.
So that gets signed up front before the first checks are cut.
Because I promise you at the end of the project, nobody's going to sign that because they're like, forget this. Now I will tell you this at the end of the year, at the beginning of the following. So for last year, 2021 work, by the end of January, by January 31st, I had to have their 1099s out. That's what you actually have your accountant or you do that says, hey, you made this much money, you submit it to the government. And then the government goes, okay, they need to pay on this. If you don't have their tax ID number, but you have their name, address, all that, you can still submit that. Okay. So they should be filling it out. So, but you need to get the sign, period. Get it signed. No ifs, ands, buts. Don't use them if they don't.
Yep.
Lien waivers. So every time, and I get this a lot from a GC to subcontractors, because if you pay someone and they're done with the job, okay, completely done with the job, or what if they didn't work out and you're at the end of your time frame and you've paid them an amount of money and they're like, well, you still owe me $2,000. They're back and forth. You never want to go to sell a property and all of a sudden a contractor or someone has placed a lien on the property. And then you go to court and you have nothing to fight that, right? Oh, it's your word against theirs. Well, guess how that works. Good luck.
Yeah. It's also like, what if you fire a contractor and they're disgruntled and they think in their mind, and this is why this
happens all the time.
This is why this stuff is so important. There was one time we did a flip in North Carolina, remember?
And, I do.
And
it was a partnership.
We hired someone. It wasn't a great experience. So we just went our separate ways. Christy fired the contractor that was working there. And
I had a partner on the ground in the area where we're doing the deal.
Yeah. And he probably was like, saw that the house was finished and the price it was listed at.
No, it wasn't even before then. As soon as we fired him, he had every excuse in the book why he didn't finish. This is exactly what happened. Right. Then the next words that came out of his mouth were, well, I'm going to file a lien. And I said,
we wrote an email and was like asking for gas receipts and to be reimbursed.
Oh, I didn't even care. At this point, I said, that's great. Please file a lien. I'll contact my attorney in South Carolina. They'll send you a letter and we'll be fine. I knew he was bluffing because it wasn't even a large amount of money, guys. But I refuse to pay someone that not going to follow through.
But the idea here is the work that he said that he had done was not in our contractor agreement, nor was it in the scope of work. And other things like silly things like reimbursement for gas and stuff that was just absurd was also not in the agreement.
Now, what's interesting is my partner was very new. So like this was his first deal. And he's like, I think we should just pay him. I'm like, we are absolutely not paying him.
So he could have screwed it up because we had the property under contract. So imagine if you are selling a house and this pops up and immediately.
So that goes,
that person wasn't paid.
Well, here's what goes to this as well. So if you have a main GC, so a lot of times people will hire GCs that subcontract people. I use all subcontractors. I might use one GC, but I'll subcontract the electrical plumber. I'm dealing directly with them. So what ends up happening is you might have a contractor that has a plumber working under him, an electrician, a drywall guy, painter. And ultimately every Friday I'm paying my GC and he's paying these guys individually. He should be paying these guys individually, right? Well, how do I know he's paying those people, right? That I've had that happen to several people I coached. The GC was cutting. Oh, I'm sorry. We got to cut this here and we're going to pay you a little less. And he was pocketing more. And now you have a disgruntled subcontractor. That subcontractor as well can file a lien. So what I recommend if I'm using a GC with all subs, I give the GC all the forms for him to sign and the subs. Everybody needs to sign when it was paid. So I know that everybody was paid and that will save your butt. Because I have had someone that I coached that went to court and it was held up for like 12 months. They couldn't sell the property back and forth. It was really bad. So I do this. It's not even a recommend. It's a don't not do it, period. Insurance indemnification form. That's basically checking on your contractor to make sure they're insured up to a certain point and what does that cover? And they're also licensed. This is important. So on that contractor agreement, you want to make sure that person is licensed. And I mean that person. So there are people that will pull their uncle's license and work under their uncle's number, but they're not insured or covered through that. Happens all the time. So make sure you have their license. You know it's them. You've checked online. You can go to like the LLR office and check the business license or call. But that insurance indemnification, I'll tell you where that saved us. So we had another partnership deal we did. We'd done a lot of those in the past. We had a brand new house that was going on the market literally on Saturday. For some reason, we were going out of town and we were going to pick our kids up from school. And I told Noah, let's go by and check on the house real fast. I just want to do a walkthrough. Noah walks in the house as fast as he walked in. He walked out. He's like, oh my God, I need a water key. Remember I told you about the water key and cutting the water off? We had used our partner's plumber. This isn't someone we had used in the past. And it's not that they did anything wrong, but they used the flexible plumbing underneath the sink in the kitchen. The house was on a crawl space. Thank goodness. That kind of salvaged half the house. They didn't glue it enough. It came undone and flooded a whole one side of the house. So guess who had to pay for it? The plumber had to pay for like $15,000. He didn't, but his insurance did for $15,000 worth of damage. What if we did not get that signed and know that and we didn't check and we didn't know he had insurance? We would have had to pay that out of pocket. That could have been like half our profit. So it's really important to do these things. It doesn't seem important right now, but I promise when you get into a deal, it's a make or break. I know
It's a lot.
That's probably the most important thing to me. The rest, the rehab, the fixtures, all of that we can work with, but hiring good people, check references. I believe in checking references. A lot of times people don't just Google someone and see anything will pull up, right? Like I also have to take that with a grain of salt, but if they've got 10 bad reviews, that tells me something. Like that's something to be concerned about. So I think just cover your tracks.
So we had the lead came from, let me stop the share here. Lead came from following up with old leads and saying, hey, are you still at this? Like,
no lead's a dead lead until they sell it, or they're like, stop calling me.
If they called you originally, it had to have been a headache. So headaches usually only get worse. So go through and call those old leads.
And you never know what someone's circumstances are now, right? During the pandemic, people have lost jobs. Yeah. People have had to move, closer to family. So some things they might not have considered selling, they might now.
Run your comps. If the numbers look good, don't waste your time going unless you need practice. But if the numbers look good, go walk the property, start running your numbers, right? Make your offers, get the property under contract. And then from the funding standpoint, put together a nice proposal. It shows that you're organized. If anything, it shows you're organized.
And I don't care that we've done a ton of properties. We still do this. So if you're brand new, this is really good because even if it's your first deal, it makes you look super professional, but you should still continue to treat everyone the same as you're going through the business. We do always all the same stuff.
Yeah. Cause it's a lot of money. If someone gives you 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 grand, that's their retirement. So the least that we can do is put together a packet that says we're going to give it back to them with interest and show them our plan. Right. And then the contractor process, 6 critical documents. You have a scope of work. You have your contractor agreement in writing of everything that's going to be getting done with the payment schedule. Make sure you have them sign a W-9 prior to cutting the first check. And then what's the other one? Final lien waiver. So once everything's finished and looks good, you have them sign saying that they've been paid. You don't owe them any more money. Have them sign off on it. Right. That's the process. So right now with that house, we are just starting reno. So,
and it's moving really fast. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
So hopefully next month we'll probably we're getting the tub sprayed on the 15th. I don't know if we might have after pictures, which should be
definitely the
cool.
kitchen will be done in the deck and the painting should definitely be done by then. And the bathroom might be one of the very last. And if we're doing some exterior, like this again is like the perfect project. Like if I could just find all of these, sometimes we have ones that are very old and they take so much more and you have to rip up everything. That actually might be our next one. We could even showcase that one. But this one is like pretty cut and dry, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so next month we'll probably do, what happened during the renovation, selling strategies. So like, it'd be cool if we could sell this house or have it under contract before we finished it, which could very well happen.
And we can talk about pre-marketing maybe next month, like the property before it ever hits the market on the MLS. Like obviously we could try to sell it ourselves and do that. Will we put it on the MLS? More than likely, right? If we don't get any hits, because that gives you the most exposure, but we can talk about ways to pre-market properties. I think that's really good. Especially because it's a crazy market right now. Like I think you could save a lot of money by not using an agent. And I think agents are totally worth it when you use them. So again, we're here to help. Remember, we're the third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. We might be switching up our time in the next couple months. We were thinking about doing like almost like a lunchtime time, because I know sometimes it's hard in the evening to get, everything together if you work or if you even do this business, kind of unwinding. So maybe the lunch power hour would be good to go through all this.
Oh, that sounds good.
Right. And they're always recorded. So you can come back and watch this again. I know we went through stuff fast, but hopefully that helps. So if you have any questions, I know we're wrapping up, put them in the chat box. Thanks for being here live. And thanks, to those of you that literally are coming back and watching this and learning something.
Yeah, I got Jane. If you're there, Jane, you can talk if you want. I just gave you permission, so you don't have to type, because maybe you're driving, maybe you're doing the Bluetooth thing. I don't know. But if
And
you have any
don't feel like
questions-
you have to either if you
Yeah.
don't want to say anything.
But you guys have been awesome. Thank you so much. If you need anything, we're easy to get a hold of. We'll see you on the Facebook site. And
check out all the resources that are offered within there. Stacy has, I mean, topics on marketing, on buying land, on Airbnbs, you name it, it's on there. So there's no reason you can't learn. So map out your time and get on there daily and have an amazing month.
all right, have a good night, guys. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.